The $7 million chandelier crashed to the marble floor at exactly 9:47 p.m. But that's not where our story begins. 30 minutes earlier, in a mansion where silence had reigned for 7 years, a little girl was about to hear the impossible. Emma Whitmore pressed her small hands against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking her father's estate. Below, luxury cars lined the circular driveway, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Teslas that cost more than most people's homes. Inside, 300 guests in designer gowns and tailored suits celebrated her father's latest tech acquisition, a $12 billion deal that made headlines from New York to Tokyo. But Emma heard none of it. She'd been born into a world of absolute silence, a world where her mother's laughter was just a facial expression, where her father's anger was only a reddened face and clenched fists, where music was simply people moving their mouths in patterns she'd learned to read but never truly understand. Richard Whitmore had spent millions trying to fix his daughter. The best surgeons in Switzerland, experimental treatments in Singapore, stem cell therapy in California. Specialists flew in from every continent, each one eventually shaking their heads with the same devastating conclusion. Emma's deafness was permanent, complete, and irreversible. But tonight, in the staff quarters where she wasn't supposed to be, Emma would discover that medicine doesn't know everything. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Are you Team Science or Team Mystery? ***. Emma had slipped away from her nanny again. At 7 years old, she'd become an expert at disappearing during her father's events. The adults never noticed one small girl in a sea of champagne flutes and forced conversations. She'd discovered the servants' entrance months ago, a plain wooden door hidden behind a tapestry in the east wing. Tonight, something pulled her through it. The hallway beyond was nothing like the marble and gold of the main house. Here, the walls were simple white, the floors basic tile. And standing at the end of that hallway, backlit by a single bulb, was a girl Emma had never seen before. She was older, maybe 12, with dark skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. She wore a simple dress, nothing like the designer clothes Emma's closet overflowed with. But around her neck hung something that made Emma stop breathing. Pendant. It wasn't the gold or diamonds Emma was used to seeing. This was different. A stone that seemed to pulse with inner light, shifting between deep blue and violet and colors Emma couldn't name. It hung from a worn leather cord, clearly old, clearly precious in a way that had nothing to do with money. The girl Zara, Emma would later learn, smiled. Not the careful, pitying smile adults gave Emma when they remembered she was deaf. A real smile. A friend's smile. Emma pointed to the pendant. Zara looked down at it, then back at Emma, understanding without words. She stepped forward. Later, doctors would say it was impossible. Neurologists would insist the human brain doesn't work that way. Scientists would demand tests and retests, searching for fraud, for tricks, for anything that made rational sense. But in that moment, when Emma's small fingers brushed against the stone, when Zara's warm hand covered hers, when something ancient and unexplainable passed between them, Emma heard. Not fully, not clearly, but something. A vibration. A hum. A whisper of sound that shouldn't exist in her silent world. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened in shock. And Zara, still smiling, nodded as if she'd known all along what would happen. In the main ballroom, the chandelier swayed. In the staff quarters, two girls from opposite worlds stood connected by an impossible moment. And Emma Whitmore's life would never be silent again. What do you think the pendant really is? Science? Magic? Something else? Hit that like button and let's find out together. ***. Emma couldn't sleep. 3 weeks had passed since that moment in the staff quarters, and every night she lay awake in her designer bedroom, remembering. The hum, the vibration, that brief, beautiful noise that meant she wasn't completely locked in silence. She needed to find Zara again. The problem? Her father had rules. Mountains of rules. And rule number 1 in the Whitmore household was crystal clear. Family didn't associate with staff. Ever. But Emma had never been good at following rules. Quick question, have you ever broken a rule for something you believed in? Comment below. And if you're enjoying this story, that subscribe button isn't going to hit itself. Asterisk asterisk. She started waking up at 5 a.m. before her nanny's shift began. She'd slip through the servants' entrance and wait in that plain hallway, hoping. On the fourth morning, Zara appeared, carrying her mother's cleaning supplies. The older girl wasn't surprised to see her. Over the following weeks, they developed a secret language. Not sign language, Emma already knew ASL. This was different. A language of shared looks and gentle touches, and, when Emma held the pendant, something she'd never experienced before, whispers of sound. Each time was different. Sometimes Emma heard nothing. Other times, she'd catch fragments. A bird song, wind through trees, once, incredibly, Zara's laugh. The sounds never lasted more than a few seconds, and they never came when Emma wasn't touching the pendant. "My grandmother gave this to me," Zara explained one morning, her lips moving slowly so Emma could read them. "Before she died. She was a healer in our village in Kenya." Emma's fingers traced the stone's surface. In that moment, she heard Zara's voice, soft, warm, careful. "She told me it carries the souls of ancient healers, that it finds people who need healing." "Why me?" Emma mouthed. Zara shrugged, a gesture that needed no translation. "Why not you?" But their secret couldn't last forever. In a house with 40 staff members and security cameras in every hallway, invisibility was impossible. Victoria Whitmore discovered them first. Emma's mother stood in the doorway of the servants' quarters at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, her silk robe wrapped tight, her expression unreadable. Emma froze, Zara's pendant clutched in her hand. She expected anger, punishment. Instead, her mother's eyes filled with tears, because for the first time in 7 years, she watched her daughter react to sound. A door closing somewhere in the house. Emma's head had turned toward it. That small, unconscious movement changed everything. "What is that?" Victoria whispered, pointing to the pendant. What followed was a whirlwind. Victoria hired investigators not to expose Zara, but to understand. They discovered stories, dozens of them. People across East Africa spoke of healers who carried stones like Zara's. Impossible recoveries, unexplained cures, always dismissed by doctors, always labeled as superstition or placebo effects. But Emma's reaction wasn't placebo. Medical tests confirmed it. Her auditory nerves were showing activity. Minimal, yes. Inconsistent, absolutely. But present. When she held the pendant, her brain scans lit up in ways that shouldn't be possible. Victoria kept it secret from Richard. She knew her husband, brilliant, rational, science-minded Richard, would never accept it. He'd call it fraud. He'd accuse Zara's family of manipulation. He'd shut it down. She was right. Richard found out on a Thursday. His head of security showed him the footage. Emma, every morning, sneaking away, meeting with the housekeeper's daughter, holding some primitive necklace. His fury was volcanic. "That family is using our daughter," he roared at Victoria. "They're selling us fairy tales and false hope." "You haven't seen what I've seen," Victoria pleaded. "Richard, she's hearing. Actually hearing. It's a con. And you're falling for it." That night, Richard summoned Zara's mother, Grace, to his study. The conversation was short and brutal. He accused her of exploiting his daughter's disability for money. He called the pendant a theatrical prop. He gave Grace and Zara until the end of the week to pack their things. Emma, listening from the hallway, not with her ears, but with her eyes, reading her father's lips through the door crack, felt her world crumbling. She ran to find Zara, tears streaming down her face. "He's sending you away," she signed frantically. Zara pulled her close, and even without sound, Emma felt her friend's heartbreak. "I won't let him," Emma signed. "I won't." But what could a 7-year-old girl do against a billionaire's decision? In 3 days, it would be Emma's 8th birthday. The biggest party the Whitmore estate had ever seen. 300 guests. International media. The perfect stage for Richard to showcase his perfect family. Emma stared at the invitation on her dresser, and an impossible idea began to form. What would you do in Emma's position? The birthday party is coming, and everything is about to explode. Don't you dare leave before part 3. ***. The birthday cake had 8 tiers and cost more than a car. Emma barely looked at it. Around her, the Whitmore estate had transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses climbing crystal pillars, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing Mozart that Emma couldn't hear. Photographers from Vogue and Vanity Fair circulated through the crowd. Her father's business partners congratulated him on raising such a resilient daughter. Everyone admired the brave little deaf girl in her custom Dior dress. No one knew she was planning a rebellion. Are you still with us? Drop a birthday cake in the comments if you think you know what Emma's about to do. And smash that subscribe button, you're going to want to see how this ends. ***. Emma had been watching the door for an hour. Across the ballroom, near the servants' entrance, she finally spotted them. Grace in her housekeeper's uniform, making final preparations before their departure. And behind her, trying to stay invisible, Zara. Tomorrow they'd be gone. Tonight was Emma's only chance. She waited until her father took the microphone to give his speech. Richard Whitmore commanded attention effortlessly. Tall, powerful, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Emma couldn't hear his words, but she'd read the prepared remarks. A touching story about overcoming adversity. A generous announcement of a donation to deaf education. Another way to turn his daughter's disability into good publicity. Emma's hands clenched into fists. She moved through the crowd carefully, practiced at being overlooked. Adults parted around her like water, their attention fixed on Richard's performance. The photographers followed his gesture toward giant screens displaying photos of Emma's brave journey. She reached Zara just as her father's speech ended. Applause rippled through the crowd. Emma felt the vibration through the floor. "Come with me," Emma signed. Zara shook her head frantically. "Your father. Please." Something in Emma's expression made Zara's resistance crumble. Grace tried to stop them, but Emma was already moving, pulling Zara by the hand, heading not toward the exit, but toward the center of the ballroom. Toward her father. Toward the microphone. Toward 300 guests and a dozen cameras. Richard saw them coming. His expression shifted from confusion to anger to alarm as Emma dragged Zara across the marble floor. Security moved to intercept, but Victoria grabbed Richard's arm, stopping him from giving the order. "Let her," Emma's mother whispered. Emma reached the raised platform where her father stood. She was tiny compared to him, a child in a party dress facing a billionaire in a custom suit. But she looked up at him without fear. "Don't take her away," Emma signed, her hands sharp with desperation. The room fell silent, sensing drama. "Emma, this isn't the time," Richard began. But Emma turned to face the crowd, to face the cameras, and in front of everyone. The business partners, the journalists, the society elite who'd come to celebrate a millionaire's daughter. She signed with fierce clarity. "She can heal me. And you don't believe in anything you can't buy." A murmur rippled through the guests. Cameras flashed. Richard's face turned red. "Emma Whitmore, this is completely inappropriate. Show them." Emma turned to Zara, desperation pouring from her. "Please, show them what happens." Zara looked terrified. Her mother was pushing through the crowd, trying to reach her. Security was closing in. Richard was signaling to end the spectacle immediately. But Zara looked at Emma, really looked at her, and saw a friend willing to risk everything. She reached up and unclasped the pendant from her neck. "Zara, no." Grace's voice cut through the chaos. But Zara had already placed the leather cord over Emma's head. The stones settled against Emma's chest, warm and pulsing with that strange inner light. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the chandelier above them began to resonate. The crystals trembled, producing a clear, high note, and Emma's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened. Her hands flew to her ears. "I hear it," she whispered. "I hear it." The words were slurred, unpracticed. A voice that had never learned to modulate properly. But they were words, spoken words, from a child who had been completely, irreversibly deaf. "I hear it," Emma screamed, and her voice cracked with the volume, with the raw emotion of a silence finally broken. Then her eyes rolled back. She collapsed. The ballroom erupted into chaos as Emma Whitmore fell unconscious in her father's arms, the mysterious pendant glowing against her chest, and 300 witnesses struggling to explain what they'd just seen. What just happened? Comment right now with your theory. Part 4 is coming, and you need to see what the doctors discover. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and crushed hopes. Emma woke 47 minutes after collapsing, surrounded by machines that beeped and whirred and monitored every function of her small body. Her parents stood on opposite sides of the bed. Her mother's face streaked with tears, her father's carved from stone. And in the corner, flanked by 2 security guards, sat Zara and Grace, waiting to be questioned. The pendant was gone, confiscated, taken to a laboratory for analysis. Emma's hands moved frantically, signing, "Where is it? Give it back." But for the first time in days, she couldn't hear. The world had returned to its familiar silence, and the loss felt like drowning. If you're feeling Emma's heartbreak right now, hit that like button. And seriously, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? The resolution is coming. ***. Dr. Sarah Chun entered the room carrying a tablet, her expression carefully neutral. Behind her trailed 3 neurologists, 2 audiologists, and a physicist Richard had pulled from MIT with a single phone call. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to sit down," Dr. Chun said. Richard remained standing. "Just tell me what's happening to my daughter." Dr. Chun pulled up brain scans on the wall monitor. Emma's auditory cortex lit up in blues and greens. "These were taken 30 minutes ago. They show neural activity in regions that have been dormant since birth." "That's impossible," one of the neurologists interjected. "Neural pathways don't regenerate like that." "And yet," Dr. Chun swiped to the next image. "These are her auditory nerves. They're not just showing activity, they're rebuilding. Synapses are forming. Connections that didn't exist this morning are present now." The room fell silent. Richard's voice was barely controlled. "The pendant. We've analyzed it," the physicist said, pushing his glasses up nervously. "It's primarily composed of a mineral we can't identify. The crystalline structure is unlike anything in our database. It emits a low-frequency resonance that—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "That we cannot explain through any known mechanism." "Is it dangerous?" Victoria asked. "We don't know." "Is it healing her?" "We don't know that either." Richard turned to face Zara and Grace for the first time. His expression was complex. Anger, confusion, fear, and something that might have been shame. "Where did you get it?" he demanded. Grace lifted her chin. "It belonged to my mother, and her mother before that. 5 generations of healers in my family have carried stones like this." "That's not an answer. Where did it come from?" "We don't know," Grace said simply. "Some gifts aren't meant to be understood, Mr. Whitmore. Only used." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, to demand rational explanations, to solve this like one of his business problems. But Emma's hand reaching for his stopped him. She signed slowly, carefully. "I'm sorry I embarrassed you, but I'm not sorry I tried." Something in Richard Whitmore broke. He sank into the chair beside her bed and, for the first time in Emma's memory, her father cried. "You have nothing to apologize for," he whispered, though Emma couldn't hear him. Victoria translated, her own tears flowing freely. "I'm the one who's sorry. I thought I could buy you a cure. I thought money could fix everything. And when this girl offered you something I couldn't purchase, I called it fraud." He looked across the room at Zara. "I was wrong. Drop a comment if you think Richard deserves forgiveness. Is wealth his only sin, or something deeper? Let's discuss." Over the next 3 weeks, teams of scientists studied the pendant while Emma underwent daily therapy, learning to process sound the way a newborn learns, one overwhelming sensation at a time. The stone's effects were inconsistent. Some days she heard clearly when wearing it. Other days, nothing. The medical team couldn't predict or control it. But they confirmed what seemed impossible. Emma's hearing was returning. Richard made his apologies not with words but with actions. He hired Grace not as a housekeeper but as an executive assistant, a position created specifically for her, with a salary that made her gasp. He offered to move Zara and Grace into the guest house, into the family's life, not as servants but as equals. And he did something else, something that would become his greatest legacy. He started making phone calls. One more part to go. Are you ready for the ending? Comment yes, if you're still here. Part 5 drops now. Asterisk asterisk. 6 months after Emma's 8th birthday, she stood before 200 journalists and spoke her first complete sentence. My name is Emma Whitmore, and I want to tell you about my sister. The words were slow, carefully pronounced, each syllable a victory. Her speech therapist had warned her not to rush. But Emma had been silent for 7 years. Now that she could speak, she had a lot to say. Beside her, holding her hand, stood Zara. Around Zara's neck hung the pendant, returned by the scientists who'd finally admitted what they couldn't explain was better left mysterious. Before Emma shares her message, let me ask you something. Are you subscribed yet? No? This is literally the moment to hit that button. Trust me on this. For 7 years, I lived in silence, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. My father tried everything. The best doctors, the newest technology, millions of dollars searching for a cure. She squeezed Zara's hand. Then a girl with a necklace her grandmother gave her showed me something important. That healing doesn't always come from hospitals. That medicine doesn't have all the answers. And that sometimes, the cure for what's broken isn't something you can buy. It's something you have to believe in. Richard stood in the front row, unashamed of the tears streaming down his face. Beside him, Victoria smiled. My father used to think everything had a price, Emma said. He's starting to learn better. And that's why we're here today. Richard stepped forward to join his daughter at the podium. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of genuine humility, something the business world had never heard from Richard Whitmore. My daughter is right. I was wrong. And when you're wrong at my level, you have the resources to make it right. He clicked a remote, and behind them, a screen lit up with the logo of a new organization, the Whitmore Foundation for Unexplained Healing. Western medicine is remarkable, Richard continued. It saves millions of lives, but it doesn't have a monopoly on healing. Around the world, indigenous communities possess knowledge that science dismisses, not because it doesn't work, but because we don't understand how it works. The screen changed to show images. Healers in Kenya, traditional medicine practitioners in China, shamans in Peru, Aboriginal healers in Australia. This foundation will partner with these communities. We'll document their methods. We'll study their treatments with respect, not skepticism. We'll bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern medicine. And we'll do it on their terms, not ours. He looked at Grace, who sat in the front row, tears of pride streaming down her face. We're starting with a $10 billion endowment, all of it dedicated to one mission, making sure that no family loses hope just because the cure they need doesn't come from a hospital. The room erupted in applause and questions, but Emma wasn't finished. She leaned toward the microphone one more time. I still can't hear perfectly, she said. Some days I hear a lot. Some days just a little. The doctors say my brain is still learning. They don't know if I'll ever hear normally. She smiled at Zara. But that's okay, because I learned something better than perfect hearing. I learned that miracles don't always look the way you expect. That family isn't just blood. And that sometimes, the poorest person in the room is holding the richest treasure. Emma held up the pendant for the cameras. This stone didn't just give me hearing. It gave my father humility. It gave my family purpose. And it gave me a sister. Zara blushed as Emma hugged her, and the cameras caught every moment of it. The moral: true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in openness to wisdom that comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the cure for what's broken in us isn't something we can buy, research, or control. It's something we have to humble ourselves to receive. Pride and prejudice can make us blind to miracles standing right in front of us. especially when they come wrapped in humble packages from people we've dismissed. Your turn. This story isn't just entertainment. It's a reminder that every person you meet might be carrying something invaluable that you desperately need. So here's my challenge to you, asterisk. 1. Comment below. Tell me about a time someone unexpected taught you something life-changing. Who was your Zara? 2. Subscribe if you haven't already, asterisk, because stories like this remind us what truly matters, and I've got more coming that'll challenge how you see the world. 3. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that miracles don't have price tags. 4. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective. Remember, the most valuable things in life often come from the people we least expect, in forms we don't recognize, at moments we're not prepared for. Stay open, stay humble, and never underestimate the power of a friendship that bridges worlds. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep your eyes open for everyday miracles. They're more common than you think.